Is this better? When I look at all your faces, not some. I'm very grateful for the opportunity to speak to you today. And I would like to take just a moment to really express my gratitude to all of you for keeping me and my family in your prayers over the past several months. I know I was blessed to have access to the best healthcare system in the world, and we're trying to keep it that way, by the way, but I'm under no illusion on who deserves the credit and the praise for my almost cure. And again, I'm eternally grateful to all of you, and I've shared this with Dale. I do refer to you as my extended family. So again, thank you from the bottom of my heart, and please keep me in your prayers. I'm well aware of the fact also that many of you have heard my personal story perhaps more than once. So I would like to apologize in advance for being redundant or being boring. But since the story doesn't change, although I wish that can be the case across the country. I think we have a person that I'm thinking of right now where the story keeps on changing. So just to make sure that I do not slip into that, my story is going to be the same. But what's really more important is the message that I have embedded in my story, and it seems that that's timeless, and frankly, it's even more fitting now than any other time in recent history. During times of economic challenges and a great deal of political uncertainty, and in the midst of a 24/7 news cycle bombarding the public with conflicting analysis and conflicting messages on the predictions of the future of America, both domestically and abroad, from time to time, it's very important and imperative to put things into perspective by reminding each other of the greatness of this nation and what it means to the rest of the world. I often tell people there's only one America left, and this is it. And more importantly, I think now than ever, it's really how to go about getting our country back. So often the story is told so passionately by those who are fortunate enough to be born in America. I believe describing America through the eyes of someone who's an American by choice, contrasted by a vivid backdrop of growing up elsewhere in the absence of security, freedom, opportunity, and peace of mind, is powerful and rather inspiring. Immigrant stories tend to put a human face, in the words of Abraham Lincoln, referring to America as the last best hope of mankind. Sadly, in the nationwide poll that was conducted in May of 2011, only 1 out of 2 Americans believe that the United States is indeed the best or the last best hope of mankind, down from 2 out of 3 50 years earlier. Now, what the polls don't tell you is how blessed America is that millions of highly talented people want to come here and call America home. The polls also don't tell you that being an American or being born in America or becoming a naturalized citizen is equivalent to winning life's lottery. In order for my remarks to make sense, it is relevant that I share with you my background and why I have the views and the passion that I have toward America today. I was born in Jordan. My family came from Palestine. The biblical town of Samaria is my original hometown in the west bank of the Jordan River. We moved to Saudi Arabia when I was 3 years old. My father worked for the Department of Defense in Saudi Arabia for 11 years. That's the Saudi Department of Defense. So the first 9 years of my education was in Saudi Arabia. And frankly, the bulk of it was by the madrasas, which we've heard so much about. We moved back to Jordan, where I finished high school, and at the age of 17, I've decided I've had enough of the Middle East. 34 years ago, on November 5th, 1979, I arrived in America to attend the American Language Academy, which is a part of Benedictine College. And I was searching for a new life. And at 17, I had no idea what that life was going to look like. But I wanted to have little resemblance to the life that I left behind in the Middle East. So the day that I arrived in America was certainly a turning point in my life, but also a point of interest. For those of you that remember November 5th, 1979, that was the day that our hostages were held in Tehran. So I've actually heard the news in the car with my father on the way to the airport. America was at the verge of taking on a tremendous adversity that would ultimately reshape our foreign policy in the Middle East, and more significantly and for good, change our way of life here within our own borders. Consequently, placing more responsibilities on the men and women who wear the uniform and on their families as well. As we honor our veterans this month, I urge you to heighten your sense of gratitude for the men and women who who serve and have served in our military for over 200 years, guarding and defending our liberties and freedoms by risking their lives abroad so that we can be safe here at home. Over 2 years ago, I was touched by the comments of a wing commander at Ellsworth Air Force Base during the change of command. He was the incoming commander. And he was so eloquent in reminding the audience that 99% of Americans are guaranteed freedom, security, and peace of mind, and they don't have to do anything in return to earn it. It is the responsibility of the remaining 1% who wear the uniform to guard these freedoms for the rest of us, and many in the process pay the ultimate price. Back to my story of coming to America. My destination was Pittsburgh, Kansas, and I found myself in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania at the age of 17. And you may think, there's no way that nobody can be that oblivious. I mean, not missing the town, missing the whole state, missing the whole region, the country. But I do beg to differ. It is easy to get lost in America when you're 17 with the communication and verbal skills of a 3-year-old. After all, my entire vocabulary was an impressive 20 words. Kansas and Pittsburgh counted as 2. English was an interesting language to learn. And I'm sure anyone to whom English is a second language would agree that learning English becomes a little easier when you're able to laugh at yourself. When you're 17, that's easier said than done. In my case, learning language went to a different level. It was somewhat comical. So there was a lot of stories I definitely cannot share with this group, but I'll share a couple of stories with you that I think would be okay with Dale for me to share. In the Arabic language, there is not the letter P. So intuitively you substitute a B. For example, you don't drink a Pepsi, you drink Bibsi. So you don't really hear the P, you cannot pronounce it. And about a couple of months after arriving here, I decided I really need a car. Walking back and forth in the middle of the winter in Missouri just doesn't cut it. And I was very picky at, again, 17. And here's the criteria that I followed. I wanted the best car a $200 can buy. Because that was stretching it, by the way. So, of course, the result was a dark red 98 Delta Oldsmobile. I think some of you can probably have a good image of what that car looks like. When you roll down the windows, you drive down the road, it looks like a boat just floating. And I think it gave me about an impressive 7 miles to the gallon. That's if I stuck to the speed limit, which was much lower than now. So, language, humor, let me finish the story with that. So with the letter P. So I'm in St. Louis, Missouri, and I'm looking for a parking space, and I came across a place where there's a sign that says $1 parking, and I pulled in. And the gentleman at the entrance took the dollar, and I identified a spot right at the entrance, so I asked him if I could park there. And without any hesitation, I give him credit, he said, as long as you don't bother the neighbors. And of course, I did not smile because I really had no idea what he was saying. But I did share the story with a friend of mine who said, well, could you just tell me slowly how you asked him? And I did, and he said, you understand the difference between parking and barking. Parking is something you do with a car. Barking is something that dogs do, and it's annoying. So then now, of course, now I know the difference between parking and barking. The other story that was rather entertaining, for some reason, I could not tell the difference between blind and blonde. They sounded exactly the same to me. So I would use the words interchangeably, and it seemed like for some reason I used them in the wrong place at the wrong time. So I would often compliment young ladies for being blind, and then for days wonder why they would not consider going out on a date with me. Go figure. So the first 6 months were extremely hard, mainly due to being homesick, but also having to adjust to a new language, a new culture, and a new diet, and above all, adjusting to Missouri's mild winters. When I arrived in Kansas, the temperature was 14 below the day that I arrived. The coldest temperature that I've ever experienced before coming here was 50. That gives you an idea of how kind of a shock this was. But after surviving the first 6 months, America became very intriguing to me. Now, keep in mind, the image that I had about America prior to coming here was based on what Hollywood exported overseas. And of course, it was translated on TV. Now, this should be a good explanation why the majority of the world do not understand the real America. More specifically at the time, of course, Dallas and Miami Vice were very popular. So I came here with the perception that Americans constantly cheated on each other, plotted against each other, or were shooting at each other. But I recognized immediately that there was no possible way to truly understand and contribute back to America without mastering the English language, including the slang, which proved to be more difficult than the formal language itself. So I carried a dictionary everywhere I went, and I used a tape recorder to pronounce words and their meanings. You never caught me listening to music. It was always tapes to help increase my ever-slim vocabulary. In order to shorten the learning curve, I disassociated myself from other Middle Eastern students. By doing so, I was forced to mumble English constantly. Another drastic measure was following the advice of a friend of mine by joining a fraternity. And I have to clarify this brilliant move, because this was not an honor society. I mean, this was, as a matter of fact, the biggest claim to fame of this fraternity was the construction of the float for the annual homecoming parade. And they had this theory that they truly believed that their odds of winning the best entry in the parade were directly proportional to the amount of alcohol that they consumed during the construction. And they always had the first entry, so do the math. And of course, they felt that no Philan Dakai float was ever complete without a big sign, a 4x8 sign that says, "Camel jockeys go home." Of course, in case you haven't guessed it yet, at the age of 18, speaking virtually no English, I did manage to find myself a redneck fraternity. So, two discoveries I made shortly afterwards. My friend, Dan Telefero, who recruited me to join the fraternity, was in charge of membership. And the qualification was, get anybody that has greater than 2.0 average. My average was very good at the time. And the other discovery that I made is that my vocabulary, which is really the reason why I joined the fraternity, my vocabulary became very sophisticated. Because you hear me talk about hangovers, Budweiser all the time. So really, that was a good move. Of course, my parents were very proud of me. But in retrospect, the real advantage was really developing close friendships with several fraternity members whom I was able to meet their parents and celebrate holidays with at their homes. And it was truly my first and most significant experience at the time on the journey to understanding America and the warmth and the generosity of the American family, which gives America her big heart. This is a conclusion that would have been virtually impossible for me to understand or capture by simply living on a college campus. In the midst of all of that, I fall in love with a Nebraska girl named Jamie, who also happened to be blind. We were married 4.5 years later, and we will celebrate our 27th anniversary next December, or next month. So, 4 years from first arriving in the US, I received a BS degree in electrical engineering. Within a few days, I left America to go back to Jordan and fulfill a 2-year required service in the Jordanian army. That was the ultimate test on how much impact America had on me during the time that I spent here. While in the Jordanian army, officers would go out of their way to tell me that I was too Americanized. Of course, they meant it as an insult. And I took it as the best possible compliment they could give me. And what it has done, it has solidified in my mind what I had suspected all along. I was ready to become an American. And I truly believe that once you accept America, you never leave it behind. You take it with you anywhere you go. After finishing my military service, I returned to America in the fall of '86 with 2 suitcases and $38 to my name. By then, the Nebraska girl that I had met in college had finished school and was teaching in the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation. So she is the one to blame for bringing me to South Dakota, if you're looking for someone to blame. We were married shortly afterward and moved to Rapid City in order to work on my graduate degree in engineering at South Dakota School of Mines. 1991 was a big year for us. In January, I received my graduate degree. In March, we started our business. And on June 14th, on Flag Day, 22 years ago, a little over 22 years ago, at Mount Rushmore, and I know there's at least 2-3 people that were at the ceremony. My good friend Dan Mulally and Tina and then Jack Jensen. I took the oath as a citizen of the United States at Mount Rushmore. What a day it was. what it was, what a thrill it truly is to become an American by choice. June 14th, 1991 was without a doubt the proudest day of my life. After repeated attempts to try to express in words the emotions that I experienced as I recited the Pledge of Allegiance for the first time as a new citizen, I realized that I am simply incapable of articulating the magic of that moment. I stood there 22 years ago, so excited, so proud, and so overwhelmed by the life-changing opportunity that was being handed to me. There were many questions going through my mind. Why me? How many across the world would never have a shot at experiencing the American dream? And most importantly, how do I give back in a meaningful way a fraction of what I and future generations of my family have been blessed with? The sense of excitement and joy of becoming a United States citizen was also combined with a greater sense of indebtedness to the nation that made it possible for me to claim life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness as my rights. On that day, I vowed to never take America for granted and to serve and give back to a nation that has blessed me with opportunities for the rest of my life. I have discovered since that this attitude of serving and giving without expecting any reward in return is one of the cornerstones of leadership that distinguishes America from the rest of the world. What sets America apart from the rest of the world in the leadership arena has to do with our attitude as a nation. In America, there is no correlation between one's pedigree and the leadership and success potential. In America, the socioeconomic class you are born into has little impact on your life trajectory. America is the only country in the world where, regardless of your race, ethnicity, or beliefs, if you work hard and play by the rules, all things are possible. In America, leaders are secured enough to empower others. From inception, America recognized the fact that you can grow by leading followers. But in order to multiply and become a superpower, leaders must lead other leaders. I do not understand where it is in the Constitution or Declaration of Independence that guarantees success to all Americans. There's a big difference between opportunity and results. America is an opportunity. What you do with it is up to you. There is no guarantee. The most essential aspect of being a good American is your ability and willingness to pull your own weight. It is interesting the two distinct answers you get to the question, how did America become such a great nation? One interpretation is that we did so by oppressive, exploitative, and imperialist means. As a matter of fact, you don't have to go too far. Just listen to the major networks. Some have a tendency to blame America for every ill in the world. The truth is, America became a great nation because our civil order was based on what George Washington called the twin pillars of faith and morality, as well as on a deep distrust of statism. The drafters of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution wisely recognized the imperfections of human nature and the corruption that inevitably results from concentrations of political power. And that's why they devised a limited government with divided powers. I'm appalled at how certain groups, and even in some cases branches of government, pick and choose segments of the Constitution to promote their destructive ideologies. And yet, intentionally and conveniently trample significant parts of the Constitution they disagree with. Whether they are declaring war on public prayer, or protesting the display of the Ten Commandments, religious statues, or nativity scenes, they tout the violation of the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment of the Constitution, which says the legislator should make no law respecting an establishment of religion. But they conveniently skip the part of the same amendment that says the government should not prohibit the free exercise of religion. You'll rarely hear the rest of the story. To best understand America and uncover the secret for her exceptionalism, you need to go back to the fragile beginning of this nation and the resilience of its founders. I urge you to probe deeply into the dialogue within the Constitutional Congress leading to independence and the creation of a union based on the notion that free people are capable of governing themselves. I urge you to digest these words of Patrick Henry. America is a nation where the Constitution is not an instrument for the government to restrain the people, but an instrument for the people to restrain the government. Groups like the Family Heritage Alliance, who are dedicated to promoting common principles that can only strengthen society's moral fabric one family at a time, are indeed our nation's firewall, and perhaps the last best hope for America. My attitude is this: if it's not broke, don't fix it. Yet some politicians in the media will tell you if it's not broke, we just haven't looked hard enough. For many years, I have made this statement that America is just fine the way it is. Today, I reflect back and I wish I can make such a statement. It bothers me that too many Americans have the tendency to take America for granted. As a matter of fact, in doing so, they are doing away with the essence of what made this country the only superpower in the world. I often wonder what President Dwight Eisenhower was referring to when he said, "Only Americans can hurt America." Only Americans can hurt America. I'm rather irritated at so many immigrants who maintain foreign enclaves in America, who just bring their box into this country and live in it. But I'm not the least worried about immigrants' children appreciating the freedoms of America. I'm indeed more worried about the American-born who do not appreciate their own country. If every American regularly spent at least a week outside the United States, we would come back more grateful and with a greater sense of perspective. Living in America is neither complex nor difficult. Living the American experience is altogether a different story. America is advanced citizenship. What you get out of it is directly proportional to what you are willing to put into it. Democracy demands involvement and hard work. It's anything but a spectator sport. What a time for all of us, this is preaching to the choir, to be involved in the political process. Every one of you, I think, already is and should be doing your part to shape the future of this country. And I tell people, frankly, especially small business owners that are always afraid, I cannot politically be involved because there's going to be a fallout, it's going to hurt my business. I tell them the following: when it comes to politics, there's two places to be. You're either at the table or on the menu. You get to decide where you're going to be. And many do not have the stomach to be on the menu because it's not a pleasant place to be. I wonder where we would be if the 56 men who signed the Declaration of Independence feared fallout. Very simple. We would have no America. Some would argue that America is no longer the melting pot that it once was, that it's more of a mosaic board that appears strong from the outside, and yet it's fragile and divided in the inside. And I tell these people that America has already crossed the threshold of the most incredible era of all of human existence. For the first time in over 5,000 years of documented history, there is only one superpower. Even the Roman Empire at its peak did not have the global influence that America has today. When on a short trip overseas, I try not to start a debate or a heated discussion over America. But I don't walk away from it when somebody else initiates it. Dale, I'm going to ask for 2 more minutes. Is that okay? All right. So I do not walk away from somebody else initiates it. Over 3 years ago, while on a trip in the Middle East, I found myself engaged in an in-depth discussion with a group of opinion makers and university professors, which of course that was a mistake to start with, discussing America with a group of people that have only read about it in a book or watched it on TV. And I found myself doing the same earlier this year in August. I went back and I was in the Middle East. The main topic was the economy. Their assertion was that America was unraveling from within and that it was economically beyond repair. You could hear a pin drop when I pointed out that the gross domestic product of the US in 20 hours, less than a day, is equal to that of an average developing country. Our gross domestic product is equal to the accumulated gross domestic products of 27 nations that comprise the European Union. And it's also greater than the economies of China, Japan, and India combined. While we only represent less than 4.5% of the world's population, we are awarded more than 50% of the patents we're in the same pot with 226 other countries, and yet we get 50%. So that gives you an idea of how creative a nation we are. Our annual foreign aids, and please listen to this, our annual foreign aids are greater than the economy of the country of Jordan and 125 other countries of similar size. That's the official foreign aids. In addition to that, Americans, out of the good of their hearts, annually give an average of $35 billion a year to charities across the world. The ingenuity and resilience of the American people is the reason why I'm optimistic about our nation's future. The fact of the matter is, whether leaders of other nations, friends and foes alike, admit it or not, they do look to America as a model for the 21st century. Unfortunately, our leadership sometimes ignores that fact. It comes down to this: as Americans, if we get it right, the rest of the world has a chance to get it right. And if we get it wrong, the rest of the world is in deep trouble. In other words, the global aftershock of what transpires here is real, good or bad. This may sound like arrogance. In fact, it's humility. It's a sort of humility that comes from bearing a heavy burden of responsibility. It's not easily assumed, and once assumed, it cannot be laid aside. History shows the world is much safer and more peaceful when America is strong, decisive, and unwavering. The glue that keeps us united as a nation is not common ancestry or a single ideology or force of arms. It's a shared set of ideas about liberty, rights, responsibility, equality, and the rule of law. It's a shared desire to get ahead. It's a shared sense of optimism that people can solve their own problem and overcome great obstacles without resorting to force or creating a huge bureaucracy. America is the only place, it's the only country that allows people the chance to write the script of their own lives. This is why people from all races and cultures are drawn to America. Immigrants risk everything in order to come here, often with nothing but the clothes on their backs. Those who are sworn enemies in their home countries lay down their arms, set aside their differences and grievances, and live side by side in this great place we call America. Dale, thank you. Family Heritage Alliance, thank you for giving me the opportunity to give back as a part of fulfilling my American dream. I want to thank you for giving me a home, and I want to thank you for sharing your country with me. May God bless you, and may God continue to bless this land that I so love, and I know every one of you does as well. Thank you.